Welcome back to the Closers Inner Circle podcast with your hosts, Denise Griffitts and Ben Gay III. In this week's episode of the Closers Inner Circle podcast, we're beginning our deep dive into page 257 of the Closers Part 2, and that's the Sales Infiltration chapter. Now, Ben has always insisted that this is the most critical and important chapter in the book, and he recommends that sales professionals read it consistently and regularly. We talked a bit about that last week. I'll get him to share that again. And given the chapter's depth and complexity, we will be breaking this down into a multi-part series. Too much invaluable information to cover in a single episode. And our goal is to unpack the intricate strategies of sales infiltration, providing listeners with actionable, write that down, actionable, excuse me, I'm going to lose my voice here, insights that can transform their sales approach. And we're going to be peeling back the layers of this chapter, revealing the nuanced techniques that separate good salespeople from truly exceptional performers. And I apologize, I am losing my voice. So listeners should prepare their copies of the Closers Part 2, as we will be going deep into the strategies, the psychology, and practical applications of sales infiltration. This isn't just a chapter, it's a masterclass in advanced selling techniques. I'm going to have Ben share with you how to get these books with free and expedited shipping, so you'll have them the next time you join us. Stay tuned, keep your notebooks ready, and get prepared for a comprehensive, very comprehensive journey through the most important chapter in sales literature. Good morning, Ben. It's Wednesday, and you're doing all the talking.
Don't do that to me. But I can hear that you're struggling a little bit, which is a lesson a woman should learn, Denise, that maybe you
Hang
talk
on.
too much.
You went there? I'm going to be talking to your wife later today. It may
Yeah,
be through email because I won't have a
one
voice.
of one of the she's not here right now, and that's one of the reasons I felt free to get that out quickly. So
Well, you're fired. So, listen, tell us first of all, how people can get the closers part one and part two.
okay, well, as you're fond of saying with you and your podcast, you can throw a stick and you'll hit the closers. But the best place to get it, because it's priced properly, free shipping. I still sign and date it. The other company brings it to me for signing and dating. Still carries an unconditional lifetime, no questions asked, money back guarantee. Is at stores, STORES dot eBay dot com / all one word Ronzoni Books, RONZONEBOOKS, stores.ebay.com / Ronzoni Books. And if you order before noon, before 2 p.m. Pacific time, it'll go out that day. We call it sudden shipping. So you'll have your books just a few days after you order them. And I recommend all the books in the Closers series, but pick one or two and start there. We are fond of the Closers Part 2. I think it's a better book than Closers Part 1, but it's like senior year in high school is better than kindergarten, but you sort of have to go to kindergarten and first grade and so on. So I recommend getting the Closers Part 1 and 2 at least. And then there's 3. 4 is underway, written by Denise Griffitts on the power of podcasting, how to do it, and so on. It's not there yet, but it will be. Closers 5 shows you the material in the closers when leaning into the real estate business. 6 is done, but not up yet. And 7 is committed to. So the library is growing, but start with at least 1 and 2, and then understand that the best thing I've ever written about selling, and all I've been at it a long time, 35 books and over 50 years, is the last chapter in the Closers Part 2, starting on page 257, Sales Infiltration. one of those things that sort of sweeps over you one day almost by accident. I read a cute thing today from one of my friends whose name, who did it, I forgot, but he was talking about how long does it take to be good at something. Remember Bob, the happy painter, whatever his name was, Bob, fuzzy hair.
I don't know his name, but Bob the
You know,
painter. I know who you're talking
yeah,
about.
they said, how long does it take to do a painting? He said 30 years and 30 minutes. 30 years to get ready, 30 minutes to actually do the painting, but without the 30 years, there wouldn't be a 30-minute painting. And he gave a couple of other examples that were quite good. In fact, I told him I'm stealing it. Uh, in a year or two, it'll be mine. But and speaking of things that get stolen, kicking off today with the concept of sales infiltration. I was talking to, yesterday, I think it was, somebody said, they've done us, we were talking about know, like, trust, and with whom you feel safe, a term I coined many, many years ago that has now become part of the nomenclature of the sales world. And most people don't know where it came from. But I said, know, like, trust, and with whom they feel safe. And he said, well, they've done a study at Harvard or somewhere, and now they've readjusted the words. It's like, trust, know, something. And I said, I can't believe that something I blurted out on stage, never thought of it, didn't have it planned, just came out 50 years ago, is now being studied at Harvard and being rearranged. So I'm sort of complimented, I guess. I don't know where stuff like that comes from, except every time I see study at Harvard, I think, oh, here's another something somebody just made up. And Harvard's done so many studies, you can't disprove them, but you can't find it. And then you just say, well, that's where I read it, whether you can find it or not. The concept, though, and the phrase I created 50 years ago was people like to buy from people they know, like, trust, and with whom they feel safe. That last phrase, and with whom they feel safe, was added pretty recently in the last year or two in a conversation with Rob Anspach. Uh, so he's sort of like Harvard. He readjusted the phrase, and I like it even better. The reason I bring it up is sales infiltration should be entitled The Way Jimmy Rucker Sells. Jimmy Rucker was a dear friend of mine. We were running buddies in high school. We each know things about each other that you can blackmail the other one to shut up on any subject. And but what he really was the best salesperson I ever personally worked with. He studied it and he learned. We had a common mentor, J. Douglas Edwards, was a big deal when we first got started in selling, and everything he said we wrote down. So he attributes a lot of what he knows to J. Douglas Edwards, which was one of the reasons I wrote a book for Doug after he died. It's called Sales Closing Hour. And that's sort of for Jimmy and me where it all started. And you can find that at the website I just gave you. Uh, Great book, and it's sort of the fun. That's the kindergarten and first grade of selling. But if you don't know it,
My
the
bookshelf.
sophisticated stuff won't help you.
Yeah, you sent me that book years ago.
Mm-hmm. I wrote it from recordings I had of his and from notes I had from listening to him, some over dinner and some from the stage. But he was really good. He, on a personal level, now that most of our listeners are behind the magic table, on a personal level, he was sort of a jackass, full of himself and arrogant and so on. But that doesn't take away from, it's like some of our politicians today, that doesn't take away from the quality of what he said. One of the things I think of all the time and teach my mentoring clients, he said, if you have most salespeople, if they have an objection, dance around it, try and change the subject. And so hope it won't come up. Their entire sales presentation is waiting for the other shoe to drop. Doug said, if you have a built-in objection, bring it up first and brag about it. Just take it off the table, acknowledge it, brag about it. Rolls-Royces, for instance, I always use that as an example. They have a built-in objection. It's the price. But I taught my friends at British Motors in San Francisco and other places that sell high-end cars, go up, hand them your card, get their card if they have one, and right off the bat say, you know, it's a pleasure to meet you. One of the joys I have in working here is I get to meet people who are so successful in their own line of business, they can afford to invest $300,000 or more in an automobile. So I want to get to know you and know more about you. But while you're saying $300,000 in an automobile, you study the pupils in their eyes and if they vomited in the back of their throat. Because some people just came in to get out of the rain, or their wives were shopping somewhere, or their husbands were playing golf. But the built-in objection is $300,000 for a starter kit in the Rolls family. So bring it up first and brag about it. If they can't do that, no matter what the story is, it's not an objection, it's a condition. They don't have $300,000 to invest in a car. And notice I said invest, not spend. That's a little Rolls Royce type thing. This car is an investment. Well, it may be in 50 years. What it is over the next 3 or 4 years, it's going to lose half its value. So you know you're dealing if they have the money and they're still interested, you know you're dealing with ego or whatever. Ray Considine, who wrote Wamish, another book I've sent you, Wamish standing for Why Are You Making It So Hard for Me to Give You My Money, which most salespeople do. But Ray said to me one day, uh, we were talking about the expensive cars, and somebody just gotten something, and I said, that's a lot of money for a car. And he said, yeah, but he said, people who say there's no difference in a regular car and a $300,000 car have never ridden in a $300,000 car. So I've always kept that in mind when some friend of mine has, I think, overinvested. I'm through my Rolls Royce days and my new Cadillac and new Lincoln and new Corvette days. I know what's going to happen to the depreciation, but when they're if they're invested in it, I'll have to admit, if you've got the money to sink into plush seats and smooth rides and so on, uh, there is a big difference. And when you pay for quality, you get it. I had a young man one day, I forget why, but he was with me for sales training. The company paid a lot of money to have him ride along with me for a week and do whatever I did. And one of the little things I did was I made him shut his eyes, and we were in Rolls, not mine, but we were in Rolls. And we rode along for, I don't know, 5 minutes. And then I slowly stopped the car and I said, open your eyes and tell me what surprises you. And he opened his eyes. He said, my God, this isn't where we started. We had moved down North San Pedro Road in San Rafael, California, about a mile, but he could not feel it or hear it in the car. Now, granted, I drove quietly and gently and so on. But if we'd been in a Ford Pinto, he would have known when we left, how long we went, and when we got there. So learn how to acknowledge the strong points and the weak points in your product or service. And if it's a built-in objection, bring it up first and brag about it. I started all this with the concept of people, so I couldn't go into selling, or I wouldn't know how, or whatever. Well, we're all, I know you've heard this in various forms before, boys and girls, but we're all in selling all the time. We sold ourselves to get married. We sold ourselves to get into the job we have, if we do. we sold our suppliers to trust us if we own our own business and started ordering things. We're selling all the time. I sell in restaurants to the server. I want good service. I want to be able to kid around with him. Gigi and I, or her, Gigi and I consider eating out a social experience. We have food, wine, and liquor at home. We don't have to go out and get it. And Gigi does it better. But we like to go out and give Gigi a break and me a break. I wash the dishes or get them ready. And neither one of us is terribly fond of that. But mainly we go out to meet people. Most people in the restaurant business don't know what they're selling. It's not that the hamburger is 50 cents more than it was last week. It's whether or not we got good service with a personality. And if the restaurant is a happy place, you can sort of tell if a restaurant has bad service when you walk in. The customers aren't as happy as they are in a good restaurant. And when we go into a restaurant, I don't become buddies and go home with them, but I'll come out having met and become friendly with 8 or 10 people just coming and going from the restaurant. It's a social experience. So another thing might be, if we're talking about selling, is know what you're selling. Contrary to popular opinion, you might have some item you're famous for, but basically a hamburger is a hamburger and lasagna is lasagna. And in my case, I can solve either one with Tabasco sauce. So Gigi says it
It's
doesn't make
true.
any difference. Doesn't make any difference what you cook him. It's all going to taste the same.
I know the last time I went to California, I had forgotten how bland not Southern food is. If it's not Southern, and we're not
Sure.
scalding our tongue, but it's spicy. It's got kick to it. And I learned that anytime I'm going to go to another state where I'm unsure of their food, I take those little mini bottles because Tabasco's right down the street from me. Well, to 18 miles. And I take those little mini bottles with me. They're in my bag. It's like, okay, I got this. I can eat this stuff. It's okay. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, bring it on. I've had Gigi resents it, but occasionally when we're going to a questionable place for my taste, I'll give her the smallest bottle of Tabasco sauce I can find. I said, just in case, put it in your purse. And
I'll have to send you
so
some little samples so you can put them in your pocket.
it makes a world of difference. Great marketing example you just reminded me of. There's a McElhenney family is who lives 18 miles from you uh, and owns Tabasco sauce. They have a lady who takes care of us in one of our favorite restaurants. Said to me one day, this is a couple of years ago, Ben, I know you love hotter things. Try this. And she gave me, and I said, oh, I know Tabasco sauce. She said, no, no, this is different than Tabasco sauce. I said, well, it says McElhenney and Company on the top. It says Tabasco sauce. She said, trust me. Well, what it really is from that company that makes the really hot stuff. I forget what the name of it is. There's some town in California that's always mad at them because their eyes are watering if they live within a mile of the plant and so on. Well, what they did was they got with Tabasco and put Tabasco's name, McElhenney Company, on the label of what they sell anyway. Sriracha, I think is what it's called.
I was gonna
Sriracha
say that,
sauce.
right. Yeah,
And
I avoid that stuff. Even I can't handle that.
yeah, it's the stuff that says Sriracha sauce is a little strong in my opinion. And I'm through my days of trying to impress people with how hot I can eat things. If it's not pleasant to me, I don't care what you think about my eating habits. But anyway, this is made by Sriracha. I don't know whose plant it's made in, but it's Sriracha primarily. And I started reading but it says Tabasco on the front and McElhenney and Company and so on. Would have fooled me, did fool me. Then I started reading the ingredients and picture the big tubs they make this thing in, 100-gallon tubs or whatever with a big paddle going around. And So I start reading down through the ingredients, and as you know, they are listed in the order of their percentage of the product. The last thing on the list of the 50 things that are in that sauce is Tabasco sauce. So that means they worked out some sort of deal where in the factory with the 100-gallon vats, somebody walks around and with a Tabasco bottle in their hand and shakes 2 drops in each pot. They're honest enough to say it's the lowest thing in the package, but it's the dominant thing on the label. So I think that's really clever. They're using Tabasco's name and logo and image to sell a product that is too hot for most people, have a built-in objection, bring it up first and brag about it. And to keep themselves honest, it can't be more than 2 drops of Tabasco sauce. I think they cut other things because it's not unbearably hot, but it is an attention getter. And I've only seen it in the bigger bottles, so I can't get Gigi to carry that around in her purse. But I do tend to go to restaurants that have it, or they know I like it, so they stock it. You know, when they bring over the little condiment tray in the restaurants we frequent, there's a bottle of that every time that we get it. But great marketing, great product, uh, and sold and presented very well. Anyway, back to we're all selling the same thing. What we're selling is ourselves. Whatever the product, whatever the widget, whatever the gadget, whatever the service, first you're selling yourselves because people buy from people they know, like, trust, and with whom they feel safe. Then people will say to me, yeah, but you've been in selling for decades. Of course they know and like you and trust you, or no, don't like you, whatever. But anyway, they've had time to make up their mind. I said, no, you're missing the point. And my mind drifted back to Jimmy Rucker again. You can have someone know, like, trust, and feel safe with you in 4 or 5 minutes if you're just reasonably good. In Rucker's case, they fell in love with him instantly. We'd walk into a room, I'd take somebody as a prospect, he'd take somebody as a prospect. I'm still getting to know the name of mine, and he's walking over with his, and they're planning family reunions. Uh, they knew, they knew, liked, and trusted Rucker
Right.
almost instantly, which is something you really need to know because most sales are made. This is one of those Harvard studies I made up, but I really believe it's true. Most sales are made, lost, or heavily influenced in the first 10 to 15 seconds. When they meet you, look at you, and their little computer-like brain runs through everybody they've ever known that looked like you, walked like you, dressed like you, had, God forbid, bad breath like you, or whatever.
Oh,
They have a log, a mental log of people. I may have told you this story, but Gigi knew in her past a guy who, let me rephrase that. Gigi's first husband, now passed away, Rafael Villalobos, was he wasn't any good. I'm sure he had redeeming qualities, but I don't know what they are. But years later, he's gone, they're divorced, he's dead. Years later, I meet this guy who's trying to sell me something. He was Raphael's twin. I mean, I would have, if I didn't know Raphael was dead, I would have assumed it was Raphael, his twin. And so I said, hi, how you doing? And so on. And he went into his little patter. And when we got done, I said, I'm just really not interested. And I don't think I told him then, but I know I told him a second time when I bumped into him, you look exactly like somebody I can't stand. Even have the slight traces of a Mexican accent because they were both of Mexican descent, although Raphael was born here. But you look and act exactly like a person I can't stand. a person I have dreamed of doing away with when he died on his own. So you start, there's nothing you can say or do. You can give me your product for free. No, thank you. Because if you do, then you'll tag along with it and get in my life. Um, it's unfortunate. But what you should say to people when you introduce yourself is, do I remind you of anyone? Because if it's Raphael, you remind them of, you're screwed. No one will buy from you. It's baked in to people, their previous experiences. And I've had people say, well, that's shallow. Well, it may be shallow. I'm just telling you the way it works. If you look, act, sound like somebody they don't like, say, I think it's Tommy Hopkins, somebody said, uh, some say yes, some say no. Next,
Yeah.
move on.
There are a
Uh,
couple of podcasters that I can read them, but I cannot listen to them. You just can't make
okay.
me listen. It's not going to happen.
No, there are, I'll tell you one, and this is sacrilege. Forgive me if I offend anybody. Jim Rohn was an old friend of mine. He was head of a company called Bestline, which was a spinoff of Holiday Magic Cosmetics. The owner of Bestline used to be president of Holiday Magic Cosmetics just before I was, and they had a breakup and uh, so on. So Jim and I come from the same background. He says things that I've heard all my adult life because I learned them from the same people he learned them from, and so on. And I love, and I haven't in a while, but for a long time, the background sound in my office when you walked in was a cassette player playing Jim Rohn tapes because the material is excellent. It was like a walk down nostalgia road for me because I grew up with William Penpatrick and his running buddy, Bill Bailey, who spun off and started Bestline. So it was sort of like going back in a time machine. I used to hear that in casual conversations at lunch, dinner, and then in seminars and so on. And a lot of it is part of my vocabulary. I can't stand to watch Jim Rohn. I have a book of his quotes right here on my desk, The Treasury of Quotes by Jim Rohn, which I draw from time to time in Facebook's postings and so on, always giving him credit. And his voice I love. I can sort of, I won't, but I can sort of imitate it because I love the way he would emphasize things and draw them out. I can't stand to watch him on video. He doesn't, saying the same thing. The cassettes I listened to for years are the audio from the videos, but his visual presentation to me looks self-serving and arrogant. You know, he comes up with the sky is blue, and the look on his face when he's doing it is like, I came up with that. You know, if I hadn't told you the sky was blue, you wouldn't know it.
All right.
You know, so video bad, cassette good, writing
Right.
great.
Right. And it's
It's
how
just
we absorb material. It's how we connect with you.
right.
People like my voice a lot, apparently, but they don't know what I look like. So they have to like my voice because that's all you're going to get.
That's all you got to work
Yeah,
with.
that's it. That's all you're going to ever have.
Are you going to have that third eye ever removed, or are you just going to leave it?
Yeah. Yes. I'm talking to your wife, and I have to tell you today, you mentioned Waymish, Ray Considine, and the reason I
Right.
say, yeah, I'm looking at it because I am looking at it. It's sitting next to my keyboard. I had it open yesterday because I'm finishing up, I think, the last chapter that I have to edit. And it's basically called, I may change it just a bit, but it's basically called, Why Are You Making This So Hard? Talking about
Yeah.
podcasting and
Yeah.
marketing. And Waymish is right there underneath the closers in the stack of books. And I went, aha. So I opened him up and I read the whole thing again last night.
Yeah. Give that some thought and work on it because there is a title for your type of material built into that. And it was Ray's favorite term. He thought that was genius. If you talked to him for 5 minutes, he would work Waymish into the conversation 3 or 4 times. And if you weren't familiar with it, then he knew you'd ask, and then he'd get to tell you. But it was a real breakthrough in thinking because, saying to a salesman, why are you making it so hard for me to give you my money? Why are you in the way of this transaction? Ray was, I still,
So many
once,
people just they overtalk, they overdeliver, they overpromise. Our spidey sense goes off, and after a while, we're like, "Shut up!
yeah,
Just I want it. I want it now. If you say one more word, I'm leaving." And I have been known to do that.
well, I'm with you. And you would have loved Ray, and Ray would have loved you. Gigi met Ray probably on two occasions, but she met him once over dinner. She was sitting at the other end of the table from Ray. I remember right where he was sitting, tall, handsome by the time I knew him, white-haired guy, but he had been a blonde earlier in his life. And he was just a force to be reckoned with. But anyway, it still comes up from time to time, and he's been dead for many years. But if I mention Ray's name, she'll say, I loved Ray. Now, there's a great example of people who like to deal with people they know, like, trust, and with whom they feel safe. She didn't know him for 10 minutes before she fell in love with him. And once a year or so, I get something from the mortuary that
Oh,
handled his things, where you're supposed to post something. Well, over the years, most years, I'm the only one that posts. But the earlier post right after it was somebody said at the funeral he spoke. He said, I was told this morning you'll get over this. And he said, I'm not ever getting over Ray Considine. And I knew exactly what he meant. Some people, Jimmy Rucker has it. I try to have it, but it doesn't come natural to me. Some people have it. Sam Goldwyn, the movie producer, said, I don't know what it is, but I know it when I see it. Well, Ray Considine had it. He was just really a unique person and therefore a great salesperson. He was sort of like Rucker. You met Ray and then you did whatever you were told. When he died, it was suddenly, but he was up in years, so not totally shocking, but it was an accident. He fell, when you look at a house and there's the lower windows in the basement, and then there's that carve out around them, with a brick wall or the whatever. So if you're in the basement, you still get to see some light. He fell into one of those on his own house, and I guess hit his head going in or something. So
window wells or something like that.
yeah, you look
I
down
can
about,
picture it, but I don't know what they're called.
yeah. Well, he fell into one. Make a mental note if you're walking around a house that has those. Be careful where you walk. So the shock was that he died, but then I knew that because he'd gotten up in years. I asked him one time, how many seminars are you doing a year now? I was still doing 300 when I asked him. And he said, oh, I don't do many. He said, Ben, everybody I knew that used to hire me is dead or retired. So knowing, and now he's dead. So knowing that he was dead and everyone he knew was dead or retired, and I didn't get the news immediately. His son, Chris, called me, said, who I had never talked to. I probably had seen him in a meeting or something, but I'd never talked to him and he had never called me. I wouldn't know how he got my phone number, but he said, Ben, this is Chris Considine. And I said, I'm not going to like this call, am I? And he said, no. Ray was gone. So Ray being old, semi-retired, everybody knew retired, it dawned on me they could have one of those sad little funerals where there's nobody there uh, or hardly anyone there. You don't fill up the front row. I've been to a few of those. And I'm in Northern California. He was being laid away the next day in Pasadena. So I told Gigi, I knew she couldn't go. I said, I'm driving to Pasadena. I've got to be there. I was Ray's best friend, and it would be a sin for me not to be at the funeral. She said, go. So I drove most of the night. It was a nighttime drive, skidded up in front of the church and went in. And I got to meet uh, the other 500 best friends Ray Considine had and get the only seat left in the church. Some people were already doing standing up and down the side. I guess they didn't spot the empty seat. I did. But that was the impact he had on people. And then, granted, most of them look like old Hollywood. There's a look of someone who's got this fancy, expensive suit on that they bought 40 years ago. There was a lot of that, a lot of oversized glasses and so on. The people that knew him was a character. And I had my little talk ready. But down in front, there were like 15 people lined up to talk. And most of them had sales experience or show business experience. And I said to myself, I'm not going to try and top that. I'll just sit here quietly and drive back home. But he was
Right.
one of a kind. And although Rucker wasn't that flashy a person, um, he had that same ability to make friends instantly. I was doing a seminar in Phoenix one day, heard about this later. The two sponsors are up on stage getting ready to introduce me, and they look over, and there's this handsome guy leaning up against the wall. He doesn't have a name tag on or anything, but he's in the meeting and listening to everything. And when they started telling me the story, I figured out who it must be because I had said to Ray, he said, I'll come by and listen to you if you'd like. And I said, oh, I'd love to. I'll leave a note at the desk so they'll let you in. He said, I don't need a note.
Remember you telling me this? He was like, but I'm Considine. What the heck?
But you can't get in if you didn't pay. I can get in. And he, as you know, is the yellow door story when he knocked on the door of AT&T at the World's Fair and you couldn't get in, 3.5 hour wait. And he goes, and I guess somebody said something inside. He said, Considine. And they opened the door and let he and Mrs. Considine
Right.
in.
I love that story. And I'm looking at this book again. You sent this to me, I think, in 2021 or thereabouts. And in big blue, text up there it says, Denise, Ray would have loved you. Like,
Yeah.
oh, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. You were and you would have loved him. I'm telling you, it
No, I
was
know.
instant. With Gigi, who from time to time still says, I love Ray Considine. I don't have a moment of insecurity because we all loved Ray Considine and
Okay.
still do to this day. But he is the classic salesperson. He was a speaker, sales trainer, a writer. You've probably seen that study that I'm making up numbers. 14% of sales call, 14% of sales are made on the first call, 21% are made on the second call, to blah, blah, blah. Does that sort of sound familiar to you? One of those Harvard
Yeah.
studies. Well,
Yeah, and
one that,
didn't you tell me years ago that most studies, the numbers are made up? I mean, they
yeah.
have no way to quantify these numbers.
Now, yeah, who would tell you that? Who would you go ask on what call did you make the sale from enough people to have a credible source? Well, that study, which is quoted all the time, frequently attributed to Harvard, Wade Cannon and another magic salesperson, he was a human behavioral uh, scientist, uh, Wade Cannon. Wade and Ray had been hired by some sales marketing team to write uh, an article on sales and marketing. So they did, and they submitted it, and it came back, or however you did that in those days. And they said, okay, it's great, but insert some specific stuff. So over wine in a restaurant, Ray and Wade made up per sale 14 sales are made 14% on the first call, 20% on the whatever. And the whole point of it is you might have to call on them 5, 6, 7 times to get up into the 80, 90% range. So don't give up and so on. A valid concept, but the figures were 100% made up. And I see them in books. Some of the figures have changed a little bit, but I see them in books and I hear them in speeches and so on. It was Ray Considine and Wade Cannon, two great salespeople, over wine in a restaurant somewhere.
It's all the
it's no,
time, especially if people are saying, okay, you've got to get your emails up running, you've got to do this, and you're going to have at least 7 touch points before they'll even talk to you.
yeah, they
And I'm
probably made that
thinking,
up too.
well, or they believe the nonsense that your buddies made up, one of the two. But I'm thinking, no, I am not going to hang around and keep poking at you for 7 times. You either like me or you don't. And really, that's how I operate. We'll get along just fine. Just be nice. But I'm not
Well,
going to nag. I just can't, and I won't let people nag me either.
in sales infiltration, we talk about setting the table, not for a $19 food job or you don't have time and it's not worth the effort, work on the percentages. But if you're selling a significant product or service or consulting or what have you, you need to set the table. And that's where you say up front, let me tell you, and I'd appreciate your openness and honesty with me too. Let me tell you, I operate. I will tell you everything I know about this product. If there's something I don't know before we leave here, I'll find out, but I don't think we're going to run into that. I will answer any question you have the nerve to ask. Any question. Nothing is off the table. And in return, when I get done and ask you to take action, I want you to take action. Yes or no, not maybe, or I want to think about it. Fair enough? And it's out of, not with everybody, and it's not foolproof, but 90% of the time, and I just made that statistic up. Sorry, Ray. 90% of the time, it sets the table, and they know when you ask for the order, they're supposed to say yes, no, or whatever. Now, I've had people say no and then call back that afternoon and say, I changed my mind. They avoided saying, I want to think about it, but they got it anyway. Talking about this reminds me of a great Ray Considine story. He goes and calls on a person, and this person had a great trick. They would get two competing salespeople in their office at the same time. He said, rather than listen to you and then try and remember what you said and then listen to you and so on. Most people the first time didn't know it, but there they were across the table from their competitor. Say, all right, gentlemen, have at it. Tell me why I should buy your product versus his and so on. So under that premise, Ray accepted the appointment and the other guy did too. And Ray was there early, but on time would have been good enough. He was on time, went in. The guy says, well, he's not here. Tell me why I ought to buy your product. Ray did. And then about 10 or 15 minutes after the appointment started, the guy said, I'm making up phraseology, but the gist of it was, well, I owe it to myself to hear what your competitor has to say. So I'm not going to give him much time, but I'm going to let him show up if he ever does. And Ray said, I understand. As he's going out, he says to the secretary, could I have a piece of your stationery, please? And she gives it to him. He says, thank you. He folds it up with the letterhead of the company showing, puts it in his vest pocket. And then I don't know if it was instant or if he had to lurk a bit outside the office. Here came the other guy. And Ray said, held up the thing where the letterhead was visible and said something like, you got to be on time for these things. Have a great day. And the next time he was back with the buyer, he said, I'm glad. The buyer said, come get your order, blah, blah, blah. He said, I'm glad we got the order. Why didn't, or did you have any concerns with the other gentleman? He said, he never showed up.
That is just so wrong. It's hysterical, but it's wrong. But you
But
have
that
to
was
do what
Ray
you have to
Considine.
do. I know. What a personality. That's crazy.
He was really something special. So people buy from people they know, like, trust, and with whom they feel safe. So what you're selling is to become the person they know, like, trust, and with whom they feel safe. I don't want to be flippant about it, but who you're with and the product is secondary to that. If they don't know, like, trust you, and so on. I probably told you this story one day. In I forget what office it was or even what company, but I was in an office looking out the window when a guy pulled up and I'd never met him, who I assumed, since he was pretty much on time, that was the guy I was waiting to interview. He got out of his car, did that deep cough you do when you're trying to clear your throat, coughed up God knows what, and spit it in the driveway or in the entranceway to the office. And it was,
No, 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 no. At
you know,
that point,
whatever it
you
was.
run him off.
Yeah, I didn't. I just listened politely. And then he says, and yes or no, or take action. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. I made up my mind not to do business with you when you spit in the driveway. There's nothing you could have said or done to save the order. Nothing. So I suspect, I don't remember the man, I don't remember the product. Uh, I'm not even sure which office I was in, Holiday Magic National Communications Center. It wasn't this one, but one of them in the past. Uh, I truly suspect that gentleman has spit in his last driveway. Probably did it that day, because you never know. Uh, Tell you a quick story on sales infiltration. And again, we talk so much that I may repeat myself. A friend of mine, Richard Burns, was selling home improvement. When I first met him, he hired me to do sales training for their company. But he was calling on a lady, and at her house, a three-story Victorian, as best I recall, and he's selling siding and roofing and so on. It could be a big job, and he said it was in an area where those people generally had old money. So he's parks his car, goes through the gates, heading up to the front door, past the swimming pool, and a little girl swimming in the pool playfully splashed some water towards him. Not a bucket, just a handful. And uh, Richard stopped, kneeled down, put down his briefcase, got some water, and threw it back at her. Well, she laughed, and her mother was there. Richard was calling on the grandmother, as it turned out. And so they had a little to do back and forth, even though he had on a suit. And he goes up, knocks on the door, and said to the lady, I'm really sorry I'm late. I stopped to talk to the little girl by the swimming pool. She said, yeah, I saw that. And so he came in, gave the presentation, and I'll make up a number. I don't remember what it was, but let's say it was $75,000, when $75,000 was a good amount of money for residing a house and whatever. And she says, the grandmother says, okay, I'll take it. And sometimes when a sale comes in too easy, it falls out just as easy. So the alarm bells went off in Richard's head, and she said, "Oh, you're surprised that I bought so quickly." And he said, "Well, I was. Do you have any questions or anything?" And she says, "No, no. All my questions were answered when I was standing on that sofa," and she pointed to a sofa over by the front wall, "watching you play with my granddaughter at the swimming pool. From that moment on, I said to myself," she knew why he was there. "If I can afford whatever he's going to offer, I'm going to take it, because I've already answered the real question in my mind. Is he a good man? And you are. Write it up."
And we've talked about this, Ben, those first impressions and how you behave when you think nobody's looking.
Right?
That's the important part. Now tell our audience what you do when you're walking out the door.
Good mood, bad mood, and I have them all.
Yeah.
Steve Williford, my co-writer, I was saying one time to him, Steve, I'm as good a writer as you are, uh, but I've got to be inspired. And Steve said, writing isn't about inspiration. I want you to write a page a day, no matter how you feel, inspired, not inspired, whatever, a page a day. And I maybe had written one book at that point. I've written 35 since, and they were all written a page at a time, one a day. If I get inspired, I might write more than that, but basically a page a day. And that'll write a 300-page book once a year. And that's plenty. So what I do I do that for writing. But when I go out, whether it's in a hotel suite or from home or from the office or whatever, wherever I am, when I head out the door to face the customers, the prospects, I straighten my jacket, stand up straight, and say to myself and out loud, we have neighbors who probably think I'm crazy, it's showtime. And from that time on, I think of the old actors and actresses. They didn't wait to be inspired. The director said, action. And you were supposed to do whatever they said until they said, cut. Uh, whether you're in a good mood, bad mood, whatever, doesn't make any difference. And so I've sold and made lots of sales presentations when I wasn't in a good mood or a selling mood or a great mood or whatever, but the customer would never know it because when it's showtime, it's showtime. Somebody asked me the other day, forgive me if it was you, but on a podcast, somebody asked me the other day, um, what do you do when you're not excited? Or how do you adjust your mindset? I think was the question. And I said, well, I'm generally a positive person. I'm one of those people who I'm like the twin in the bedroom full of horse manure. I'm looking for the pony. The other twin is crying that there's nothing in there but manure. And I'm saying, with all this manure, there's got to be a pony in here somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, so I'm the pony,
Or a garden or something.
or yeah, something.
Yeah, there's something in there.
It's ready to grow. Get the seeds. It's ready. But so I'm generally blessed with a positive, upbeat personality, even when the facts don't dictate that I should be positive, upbeat at that moment. But when I'm not, it's showtime. Is the attitude adjuster because nobody cares how you feel at that moment. They may be empathetic, if they knew, but they don't know. What they want to know about the sales presentation is what's in it for me. And I'm constantly being asked, how has sales changed since you've been in it? And I said, well, terminology has changed. We don't say dude as much as we as we did 30 years ago. But other than that, it's just terminology. What they want is a concise sales presentation that you've tested and adjusted and so on, so you're not wasting their time and you're not wasting yours because it's effective. And then they want you to present it in a pleasant manner. They subconsciously probably want to know, like, trust, and feel comfortable with you. Who wouldn't? What's wrong with that? So that's what they want. And the whole time they're listening, what's in it for me? And
Exactly.
that was true with the Indian silk peddlers 2,000 years ago or whenever they were around. It was true with a Yankee peddler on horseback riding up and down the East Coast selling his wares. And it's true today with email and texting and Zooms and so on. They're always saying, when I'm doing a Zoom with somebody and I'm looking at them, I try and focus on what they want to know is what's in it for me. Look at that. Look, what was that expression? Is he bored? Is he getting the information she wants? Does she like me? Does she trust me? Etc. But it all boils back down, terminology changing, things that we use change. What's in it for me? That's all they really want to know. And if the answer to that is, I would rather have that widget in his hand than the $500 in my pocket, they will give you the $500. If you don't build the value and explain it well with a tested, proven presentation, then they would just as soon keep their $500 and let you keep your widget. It's a pretty simple concept. One of the things, Denise, that I sometimes feel bad about, not really, but I feel bad about, is that many of us in sales training, first and foremost, I'm still a salesman. I stopped selling from time to time to train other people how to do it, but I'm a salesman. On my business card under my name, first comes salesman, second comes speaker, sales trainer, consultant. But first is salesman. I'm very proud of that. And So I've studied it, and I've been blessed to have known some of the great salespeople in the last 100 years. Go back 100 years, I knew a lot of them. Not that I was alive 100 years ago, but some of them were. And up to people who came. I'm sort of coaching and encouraging people today who haven't been in selling or sales training more than a year or two. But I was there. I understand that. So I encourage them and help them when I can. And sometimes I say to people, anybody can learn over time, but in the meantime, don't give up your day job. This may not be for you. It's trainable. I don't know if you're willing to put in the work, but if you're not willing to put in the work, this may not be for you. So we're in a unique
Right.
position to help people who are selling. We've got people listening now who are selling or trying to be more successful, which involves selling no matter where you are on the totem pole, but get good at it. I have not had the success I've had by not getting good at it. And I think I told you, and I'll make this the last one since I'm sure we're short on time. Um, Bill Dempsey, the guy who recruited Jimmy, all in one day in one meeting, recruited Jimmy Rucker, Ben Gay, and Zig Ziglar into Holiday Magic Cosmetics. One presentation got all three of us. Rather amazing. But Bill he gave me a copy of Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill's book, not knowing a few years later Napoleon Hill would be my personal mentor and would be working for me, due partly because I read the book. And he gave me an old record, which is right here on my desk, it's 33 and a third or 78 maybe, record of Earl Nightingale's The Strangest Secret. He said, listen to this, read this, you're young and inexperienced. We need to, in so many words, we need to grow you up fast. So I dug in and started listening. And then one day, Bill Dempsey, I walked into the meeting at the Georgian Terrace Hotel, where he held meetings 5, 6 nights a week. And he said, Mr. Gay, may I see you for a moment? I went over and I said, yeah, how you doing, Bill? He said, I don't want you coming to the meetings anymore. I won't go through the economics, but that almost wasn't possible. I had more money than I'd ever seen, borrowed and invested in that business. Not going to the meetings wasn't one of the options. So long story short, I said, all right, how do we solve the problem? He said, you learn the scripts that I gave you the day I gave you Think and Grow Rich and The Strangest Secret. I told you to learn them word for word. You haven't, and you come here every night without anyone with you because you didn't learn that script. And because people see you here every night, they assume you're doing well. And when they need help, they call you over and you go over to the table. And not only do you have not have anybody there, you blow theirs off. So you may come back to the meeting the night after you stand in front of my desk and do the recruiting script, the opportunity meeting itself, the post-sell, and the 6 closes that you're supposed to be saying to people instead of whatever it is you're saying. And when you do that, I'll let you come back to the meetings. In the meantime, I'm not kidding. Do not step foot in this hotel. And he turned and walked away. There's an old Southern joke, the punchline to which is, no one ever explained it to me that way before. And no one had ever explained it to me. It was learn the script or else. It wasn't inspiration. It wasn't dedication to the job. It was Bill Dempsey saying, this is not a suggestion. It's a condition of employment. And with that, you've gotten away with not having to say much because of your
I
throat.
have, yeah.
With that, I'm done.
Yoo-hoo. I didn't, I didn't have to do any talking at all. What are we going to talk about next week? I know we're going to go into part 2 of our sales infiltration deep dive. Is there anything in particular? Are we just going to,
Let's just start with the
yeah, we
beginning
just wing
of
it.
sales infiltration on
Okay.
page 257.
257, we can do that. Okay, is there anything else you want our audience to know before I reluctantly cut you loose and then call your
Oh,
wife? Because
but
I've threatened twice, so I have to go forward with
while I
it.
was talking, I was snipping phone cords with a wire cutter, so you can't get through to her. But no, I'm pretty much done, except on the mentoring. I won't give a sales presentation on it, but because I listened to a friend of mine talk about delegating more, no matter how much you're delegating now, delegate more, free up more of your time to do what you want. I've done that, and I've freed up some mentoring time that I didn't think I had. So if you're interested in the mentoring that I do, and Denise does on somewhat different subjects, but the mentoring that I do, just shoot me an email at bfg3@directcon.net. If you have one of the books, uh, look on my business cards in there, just look down there and get the email off of it. If you don't have one of the books, I don't want to mentor you because that's one of the first questions I'm going to ask you. Do you have the closers? And if you don't, you're not ready for me to mentor you. So get that out of the way first. But other than that, it's been a delight as always talking to you, Denise. You are really something special.
When I shut up, huh?
Especially when you
Yeah.
shut up.
See, I am comfortable with you. I can let you insult me with impunity, but I am calling your wife, so you'll just be scared, be very, very scared. Well, listen, everybody, you can find us next week, and we're going to be really, we talked about sales infiltration last year, but we're going deeper this year because we're going to be spending more time. And what we really want from you is for you to have the books, get them, have them in front of you, crack them open when we tell you what page we're going to be on. But ask us questions, send them to us, and prove that you're reading these books, that you really are interested in what we're going to be sharing with you. And we will see you next week. Ben, thank you so much.
Thank you.